Have you ever felt your heart yearning for something, yet hesitated to move forward out of fear? Have you ever stood at a crossroads, knowing a single small choice could change your entire life? There are moments when the world feels too heavy, as if the air itself weighs on your shoulders. For Tenzin, that moment came on a misty morning in a Himalayan village, where mountains stood like silent sentinels, their peaks lost in the clouds. Tenzin was a young monk, just 20, with a shaved head and a loose saffron robe draped over his slender frame. Each dawn, he sat by the cracked stone wall of the monastery, watching the valley below come to life. The first light touched the dewdrops on the grass, as if the world were whispering secrets only he could hear. Tenzin was different from the other monks. While they chanted with steady voices or debated scriptures with sharp wit, he was quiet, almost invisible. But his eyes carried a weight. They were eyes that held a question too vast to put into words. He had grown up in that village, in a house made of mud and dreams, raised by his mother, Lamo, who sold woven blankets at the market. She often told him, "Tenzin, your heart is your compass, but courage is its map." Back then, he didn't understand her words. He was just a boy who loved the feel of her rough hands ruffling his hair. Life in the monastery was simple but not easy. The days stretched long, prayers at dawn, chores under the midday sun, and evenings spent copying ancient texts by candlelight. Tenzin loved the rhythm of it, the way it anchored him. But something stirred in his chest, a restlessness he couldn't name. He watched hawks soar above the peaks and wondered what it felt like to fly, to break free from the paths of tradition. The other monks noticed his silence, mistaking it for peace. But Lamo saw otherwise. "You're searching for something," she said, her voice soft as the wool she wove. "Don't be afraid to find it." One autumn day, as the leaves turned a fiery red, a rumor spread through the village. A group of travelers arrived, speaking of a sacred festival in a distant valley, 3 days' walk away. It was a gathering of wisdom, where monks, scholars, and wanderers shared stories under the stars. The reward wasn't gold or glory but something rarer, a chance to ask a question of the elder Lama, a man whose words were said to unlock truths hidden in the heart. Tenzin overheard this while fetching water from the stream. His bucket slipped from his hands, splashing his robe. One question. Just one. His mind raced with possibilities. What would he ask? What did he want to know? The thought gnawed at him as he swept the monastery courtyard that evening. The broom's bristles scraped against the stone, a steady rhythm that couldn't drown out his thoughts. He imagined standing before the elder Lama, his voice steady, asking, "What?" About purpose, perhaps. Or freedom. The idea of the journey thrilled him, but it also frightened him. He had never left the village. The monastery was his world, safe, predictable, familiar. To leave meant stepping into the unknown, with no promise of answers. That night, Tenzin sat by his mother's side in their small home. The fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls. "Ma," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "what if I went to the festival? To ask the elder Lama a question?" Lamo paused her weaving. She looked at him, her eyes searching his. "What's holding you back, Tenzin?" she asked. He fumbled for words. "It's far. And, what if I fail? What if I don't even know what to ask?" She smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "The journey will teach you the question." Her words lingered in the air, warm and heavy, like the scent of barley tea. "What makes you hesitate when you face an untraveled path? Is it the fear of failure, or the doubt in yourself?" The next morning, Tenzin stood at the edge of the village, a cloth bundle slung over his shoulder. Inside were a few flatbreads, a water flask, and his mother's old prayer beads, their wooden surfaces worn smooth by years of touch. The path ahead wound through the mountains, a narrow trail of dirt and loose stones. He glanced back at the monastery, its red roof glowing in the dawn. Part of him wanted to stay, to sink back into the comfort of routine. But his mother's words echoed, and he took his first step. The journey was harder than he'd imagined. The first day, the trail climbed steeply, and his legs burned with every step. By noon, his flask was half empty, and the sun beat down mercilessly. He rested under a lone juniper tree, its gnarled branches offering little shade. As he chewed a piece of flatbread, he noticed a small flower pushing through a crack in the rock nearby. It was wilted, its petals curling inward, yet it stood defiant against the harsh wind. Tenzin stared at it, feeling a strange kinship. Perhaps courage wasn't about being fearless. Perhaps it was about growing where you were planted, even when the ground seemed impossible. The second day brought a new challenge. Tenzin reached a narrow pass where the trail hugged a cliff's edge. Below, a river roared, its waters churning white over jagged rocks. The path was barely wide enough for one person, and pebbles skittered under his sandals. His heart pounded as he pressed himself against the cliff, inching forward. "Just breathe," he muttered to himself. "One step at a time." A gust of wind tugged at his robe, and for a moment, he froze, imagining the fall. But then he thought of the flower, his mother's hands, the question he hadn't yet formed. He moved forward, slowly, until he reached solid ground. He sank to his knees, his breath ragged. "I did it," he whispered. "I'm still here." That night, as he camped under a sky blazing with stars, Tenzin felt the weight of his solitude. This almost overwhelming. He clutched his mother's prayer beads, running his fingers over them. "Ma, am I doing the right thing?" he asked the darkness. No answer came, but the stars seemed to shimmer brighter, as if nudging him onward. By the third day, exhaustion set in. His feet ached, and his shoulders sagged under the bundle's weight. The trail grew steeper, and a cold rain began to fall, turning the dirt to mud. Tenzin slipped once, catching himself on a rock that scraped his palm raw. He sat in the muck, rain dripping from his hood, and for the first time, doubt crept in. What was he chasing? A question? A truth? What if the elder lama had nothing to offer? "I'm just a monk," he said aloud, his voice swallowed by the rain. "What am I even doing here?" The mountains didn't answer, but their silence felt like a challenge, daring him to keep going. When you stand before an opportunity, do you dare believe you're worthy? Or do you let the fear of rejection steal your dream? The festival was nothing like Tenzin had imagined. When he arrived at the valley, it was alive with color, red and gold tents, laughter, the scent of incense drifting through the air. Monks in robes mingled with villagers, children darted through the crowd, and a low hum of chanting filled the space. But Tenzin's heart sank. There were hundreds of people, each eager to speak with the elder lama. How would he, a quiet monk with no grand story, ever get his chance? He found a spot near a bonfire and sat, his wet robes clinging to his skin. An old woman nearby noticed him shivering and handed him a bowl of steaming soup. "You look like you've carried a mountain to get here," she said, her eyes crinkling with kindness. Tenzin managed a small smile. "It feels like it," he admitted. "Why did you come?" she asked. He hesitated, the words catching in his throat. I want to ask a question. But I don't know if it's the right one." She nodded, as if she'd heard this before. "Sometimes," she said, "the question finds you when you stop looking for it." That night, Tenzin couldn't sleep. The festival's energy buzzed around him, but inside, he felt like he was unraveling. He thought of his mother, alone back in the village. What if he'd made a mistake leaving her? What if this journey was just a foolish dream? He wandered to the edge of the camp, where the elder lama's tent stood, lit by soft lantern light. A line of people waited, each clutching their hopes. Tenzin joined them, his heart pounding. When his turn came, he stepped inside, his hands trembling. The elder lama was older than Tenzin had expected, his face a map of wrinkles, his eyes bright as a child's. "What is your question, young monk?" he asked, his voice like a warm breeze. Tenzin opened his mouth, but the words he'd rehearsed vanished. His mind was a storm of doubts, about his purpose, his courage, his place in the world. Finally, he whispered. The elder lama leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Because," he said, "you think the path is outside you. But it's here." He touched his chest, right over his heart. Courage isn't in the question you ask. It's in the steps you took to stand here. Tenzin left the tent in a daze. The elder's words were simple, yet they cut through him like a blade. He had walked 3 days, faced cliffs and rain, only to learn that the answer was already within him. He felt cheated, but also strangely light, as if a weight had lifted. If you knew the answer lay within you, what would you do to find it? Would you dare to keep going, even when the path ahead is shrouded in mist? On the journey home, Tenzin moved with a new rhythm. The mountains no longer felt like barriers but like old friends, guiding him back. When he reached the village, he found his mother waiting at the gate, her shawl pulled tight against the evening chill. "Tenzin," she said, her voice breaking with relief. "Did you find your answer?" He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I found something better," he said. "I found the courage to ask." The days that followed were different. Tenzin returned to the monastery, but he wasn't the same quiet monk. He began to speak, softly at first, then with growing confidence, sharing stories of his journey with the younger monks. They listened, wide-eyed, as he described the cliff, the rain, the flower in the rock. He didn't win a grand prize or return with a profound revelation, but he carried something more valuable, a belief in his own heart. One evening, as he sat by the monastery wall, watching the valley glow under the setting sun, a young boy approached. "Tenzin," the boy said shyly, "how do you know if you're brave enough?" Tenzin smiled, remembering the elder's words. "You don't," he said. "You just take the first step, and the courage finds you." The boy nodded, his small face thoughtful, and Tenzin felt a warmth spread through him. His mother was right, his heart was his compass, and his courage was its map. The world didn't change because Tenzin walked to a festival. No one in the village called him a hero. But every time he looked at the mountains, he saw something new, a reminder that courage isn't loud or grand. It's the quiet choice to keep going, to trust the path within you, even when the way ahead is hidden in mist. So what about you? Is there a path you're hesitating to take, a question you're afraid to ask? Take one small step today, maybe a conversation, a decision, or simply listening to your heart. Share your story in the comments, or pass this on to a friend who needs a little encouragement. Let Tenzin's journey remind